Midi E 3000, 301, Rid 1. Midi E 3000, 301 was a prototype electric locomotive of class E 3000, 300 designed for the Chemins du Midi, France. Because of poor performance, it was refused by the Compagnie du Midi and was redeployed to Swiss railways. On 1 May 1919, it was classified FB2/5 11001, and in 1920, it became experimental locomotive B2/5 11001 of the Swiss Federal Railways SBB. Overview. Overview. Many lines of the Midi network being mountain lines, the company began an electrification program in 1909. The system chosen was single-phase alternating current at 12 kV and 16.2/3 HC. 6 prototype locomotives were ordered for the Perpignan-Villefranche-Conflent line. They were E3001 from Thomson and General Electric, E3101 from AG and Henschel, E3201 from Westinghouse, later SNCF1 Cone 3900, E3301 from Brown Boveri and SLM Winterthur, E3401 from Ateliers du Nord et de l'Est, E3501 from Schneider. The E3301 locomotive was expected to perform the following tasks: haul a 400-ton train on a 2.2% gradient, haul a 300-ton train at 40 km/h on a 2.2% gradient, haul a 100-ton train at 60 km/h on a 2.2% gradient, be equipped with an electric brake for descents. Technical details. The companies SLM Winterthur and Brown Boveri built the E3000-301 locomotive in 1910-1911. Power was provided by 2 large Dury repulsion motors that filled almost the entire engine room. The speed and direction of the motors were controlled by brush shifting, allowing the train to start without jolting. The motors were powered at 1250 V by 2 traction transformers connected in parallel. The power of the motors was transmitted to the central axle by 2 inclined rods without gears, then to the other drive axles by coupling rods. Trials. The E3000-301, equipped with auxiliary transformer windings for 15 kV operation, was tested on the Spies-Fruithagen line. During these tests, some design faults became apparent. On 18 February 1912, the locomotive was transferred to Perpignan, and trials continued until 16 August 1912. The locomotive was unable to deliver the required performance, as was the case for 2 other machines. Another gave partial satisfaction, but only E3000-201 was fully satisfactory. The Midi also ordered rail cars EABD1 to 30, which became Class Z4900 of the SNCF. Modifications. The Midi returned the locomotive to its makers, who used it as a test vehicle for individual axle drive. This had already been used for moderate powers and speeds, but experience was lacking for the transmission of higher powers. One motor was connected to an axle through a T-Shunts drive. The second motor was connected to an axle through a BBC Butchley. The third driving axle was left unpowered. As a result, the wheel arrangement changed from 1 cone to 2 boon. Similar tests were done later on the SBB CFFFS E4/8. Service in Switzerland. The modified locomotive was first tested on the Lochberg railway line. On 1 August 1918, it was officially handed over to the Bern-Lochberg Simplon Railway BLS under number 2 bone 10001 for the start of the tests. Until 1919, the machine was used to haul passenger trains on the Thun-Spies line. On 1 May 1919 it entered permanently the service of the SBB under the number FB2/5 10001. From the energizing of the line from Bern-Spies on 7 July 1919, it began to haul passenger trains. By the end of 1919, it had traveled 24,500 kilometers. In 1920, when it became B2/511,001, it traveled a further 5,500 kilometers. In 1921, the total was 35,300 kilometers. Around this time, the locomotive was nicknamed Victor. SBB were receiving new and better locomotives, so they looked for a new assignment for Victor. On 1 June 1922, it was assigned to the Ursfeld depot to haul trains on the Ursfeld-Arthgoldau and Ursfeld-Lucerne lines and covered an average daily distance of 224 km. Between 1923 and 1924. It also pulled passenger trains on the Gotthard line between Lucerne and Bellinzona. In 1924 it traveled only 2,000 kilometers, apparently because of accident damage. In 1925, Victor was transferred to the Lucerne depot and hauled trains to Rotkreuz in the canton of Zug, Zurich, and Arthgoldau, and still traveled 202 kilometers daily average. Also in 1925, the train heating boiler was replaced by a 1,000-volt electric train supply. From 1 October 1926, its use declined and it was used only occasionally on short freight trains. In May 1927, traffic to Rotkreuz and Arthgoldau increased and Victor was put back into service and traveled 135 km every day. On 15 May 1928, the locomotive B3/512,201 resumed its services, and Victor was relegated to shunting duties at Zurich depot. It covered only about 7,000 kilometers in 1928. In 1929, the mileage dropped to 592 km. Final years. In 1929, Victor was converted into a self-propelled welding wagons Z1/5 Indeg 99,999, which later became XTE1/5 Indeg 99,999. It was withdrawn on 17 September 1937 and scrapped in December 1937.